Let's dive into the third chapter of this book and find out why does our brain even bother to build habits. My favorite quote from the chapter. It's only by making the fundamentals of life easier that you can create the mental space needed for free thinking and creativity. There is an interesting experiment conducted by this psychologist named Edward Thorndike, and I will link it below in the description for you to check out. But basically, it talks about the behavior of animals in his experiment that help us have a fundamental understanding of how habits are formed and what drives our behavior. So, a cat was put in a box which had some form of an escape mechanism, such as pressing a button or a lever. And once a cat would be able to open the box, it would run over to a bowl of food across the room. So, Thorndike conducted a lot of trials. With each trial, the cats got better and better at finding where the escape button or lever was. And they were able to break out of the box in under 5 seconds by the end of his last trials. So, what does this all mean? He concluded that behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, and those that produce unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated. So, the first time you find yourself in a problem, you are just like Thorndike's cat. You're trying to figure out what will work out for you. The moment you find a rewarding event, the brain wants to record all the activities that happened just before this so that it can catalog and improve your way of doing things. And the next time, you would straight on do those things that give out a reward. But as we create these habits, the level of activity in our brain decreases. Our brain no longer needs to learn by trial and error. It would have already fine-tuned the process of doing the same thing now, over and over again. So you could say, habits are literally mental shortcuts learned from experiences. Let me break down the structure of a habit for you that is mentioned in this chapter. A habit is basically a 4-step process. Cue, craving, response, and a reward. So first, there is a cue, a trigger for our mind to do something. For our ancestors, they would pay attention to things that help them get food, water, or land. For us, it might be things that help us get money, homes, a decent living. The second is a craving, the urge or the driving force of any habit. Without a strong desire to do anything, we just won't do anything. You do not want to binge shows or watch television. You just crave the feeling of being entertained or filling that gap in an otherwise boring day. Then, there is a response to this craving. This is where you decide to take an action. It could vary from person to person depending on how motivated you are and how much effort it actually takes to do the job. You can only do a habit if you're actually capable of doing it. You can't just start driving a car unless you actually know how to drive. Then finally, there is the reward. And we want rewards because rewards satisfy us, and they let our brain know which actions should you remember for the future. And all of this is a loop. Any missing part of this cycle would result in not actually forming a habit out of it. These 4 things form the habit loop. So then, let me tell you how I use this method to eliminate a bad habit, or let's call it something that I wanted to do less of. So I had this habit of checking my phone constantly. The constant urge of just opening up Instagram and staying there till I broke out of it. I needed to change this, and here is what I did. I inverted the habit loop. Let me show you how. Step 1. I made the cue or the trigger invisible. I removed all social media icons from my homepage so that I no longer had the urge to see them and click them instantly. Step 2. I tried to remove the craving. I made it a very unattractive process for myself to actually open up these apps by hiding them either in folders on the last page or just removing them out of the site. Step 3. I managed to remove the response, eventually because I was not enjoying this process of having to go through tons of steps just to open an app. Step 4. I made the reward totally not worth it. It took me some forcing, but eventually my brain was able to figure out that this is totally not interesting and rewarding. And as a result of all of this, I was able to cut my screen time by a lot. And eventually, I just deleted social media apps from my phone altogether. I could always check the unattractive web versions of these apps for any messages that I might have missed throughout the day. And here we are at the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the third chapter and were able to take something away from my experience. I'd really encourage you to take some time and introspect. See you in the next chapter.